horticulture sector itself, really access to markets is the biggest thing that we need to advocate for and keep pushing for. Not just access to the markets themselves, but the logistics to get our produce into the markets that they need to go into. Traditionally, we're exporting about 80% to the region and a really smaller amount to Europe, mainly Europe. But during the since March up up to now, the we're shifting towards more focus on the European markets and not as much on the regional markets because of the restriction
It,
the restrictions, sorry, on movement. So we've seen export volumes to a certain degree go down, but the revenues, on the other hand, kind of increased because we were now focusing on our um, higher yield markets.
if we're talking about our traditional, when you're talking about high yield markets, are we talking about us exporting the traditional exports, coffee, tea, or are we looking at diversified agricultural exports?
It's basically a combination of everything. Specifically within horticulture, that's where I was saying the the market trends have shifted, and we're focusing on the European markets more than we are on the regional markets. But when we're talking about tea and coffee, those have remained the same. They've remained the same. We've had the same main export markets for tea over the last couple of years, and coffee as well has remained the same. However, with the effects of the pandemic and the different restrictions that are around the world, of course, all the commodities have been hit differently. Whereas we've seen that volumes as well as revenues from tea have increased over this half year period, basically from January to July. When we're comparing it to the previous year, for tea, we've seen an increase, but for coffee, we've seen a deep decline, almost up to 50% decline from what we were making during the same period last year, mainly because with the restrictions that are ongoing, cafes are closed, restaurants are closed, and these are usually the places where you'd expect to find specialty coffee. So whereas for tea, domestic consumption, as in consuming tea at home, has not been affected. But we're seeing an increase in home consumption of coffee as well, which is leading to us also trying to see how to re-strategize and focus a little bit more on the roasted or the value added coffees, so that we can take advantage of this time where everybody is at home and they're ordering their coffee ready um, to be brewed at home.
Cynthia, before we get into the numbers, how capital intensive is that new strategy?
Relatively high, but the returns are also relatively high. So it's a worthwhile investment.
Okay, let's look at the numbers. Coffee dipped by almost, coffee sales volumes, I believe, all sales from coffee dipped by almost 50% at 46%. While tea, on the other hand, seems to have picked up greatly as a result of the pandemic. Should we put the growth in tea revenues down to the pandemic in particular, or is it down to previous campaigns and strategies to push Rwandan tea?
It's not just the pandemic, and the pandemic didn't add anything extra to what we were already anticipating and projecting to see this year for tea. There was a lot of input and a lot of investment that was put into the production side, which led to an increase in the volume of the tea that we had, like made tea, to sell. So with already more tea to sell, that much more to export. But then we received fairly good prices throughout, basically from January up until May. Our were on average higher than